G'day guys, and welcome to the third episode of Purebred Reds Adelaide United Fan TV. We're here tonight to film the season preview for the A-League, and also I've got my first co-panelist on the show for the first time. This is Reece Bruinsma, a massive fan of United from down the years. Been going to games with him for the best part of the last 8 years probably, and so it's great to get him on the show for what is a very important episode. So Reece, getting into season 2018-19 for the Reds.
Thanks for having me.
No, thanks for being here. It's great to have you on for the first time of hopefully many times. We're just going to start by recapping how we went last season. So obviously Marco Kurz came in after what was a pretty disappointing year with Guillermo Moore. We ended up finishing 5th after everything, losing to Melbourne Victory in the first game of the finals. Towards the start of this year. Your good and bad from last year, just sort of briefly.
Good. Definitely Mr. Marco Kurz.
Yep.
We look to have a particular steal back into the team that we haven't had in a long time. And I guess kind of changing styles away from the whole Spanish experiment. Bad. Ultimately losing to Victory in the knockouts, never the way you want to bow out the season, but yeah, we probably lost a few too many games at home as well.
Yeah. Do you think with Kurz, a lot of people go on about how he sort of came in and brought back the type of passion on the sideline that we haven't really seen since the early gone bow days? Do you think that went a long way in deciding the fact that we ended up having a pretty sort of healthy season all in all? Just having really lost that passion from the side.
Definitely
more years.
A more to Kurz is two sides of the spectrum really. And I mean, as a fan, you love seeing your coach getting that worked up.
Yeah.
And I'm not in the dressing room, but I like to think the players buy into that as well.
Absolutely. So where would you like to see us improve generally in season 2018-19 if you had a magic wand right now and you could make it happen?
I mean, again, I sound like a broken record, but the only thing I'm a little bit sceptical on is where the goal's going to come from.
Yeah.
It's been that way for a few years now, too many years.
That's definitely the case. And, I feel like every time we see a Fox Sports or an SBS covering a season preview with Adelaide United, this is probably one of the most referred to points. It's always, where's the number 9? How can we rely on scoring plenty of goals when, firstly, the 9 that we've got, who we want to ideally be starting as often as we can, is injured fairly often. And secondly, when he's not around, there's not really another recognised number 9 that has a proven track record. So where do the goals come from?
Who knows? This could be the year. Maybe Benny
Halloran.
Yeah. George Blackwood.
Yeah.
Who knows? Even Ken Urslow.
Yeah.
We'll have to wait and see.
We will indeed. Okay, so getting into our ins and outs for the season. Ins, Michael Jacobson, Craig Goodwin, Ken Urslow, Mirko Boyland, Scott Galloway, Ben Halloran, and a few of the youth team players who have been promoted to senior team contracts. And then the outs that we've got: Tarek Elrich, Johan Absalonson, Ben Garuccio, Mark Odsheng, Jordan O'Doherty, Daniel Adlung, Cengiz Kavucevic, Ersin Gulam. And just on that topic quickly, that's one of the things I'm most unhappiest about going from last season to this season, the fact that we've lost a lot of names there, and certainly individuals who stood out for a big part of last season, namely people like Ersin Gulam, who never really played to the biggest heights that he could, mainly due to injury a lot of the time, and also Johan Absalonson, who had plenty of goals in him, as we know from the start of the season, but then he got various injuries along the way. Definitely one of the shiniest imports off of last season, and also Daniel Adlung for me is a huge loss. A player that for me could play sort of anywhere across the midfield three. Had plenty of goals in him, could score from long range, and just really tenacious player. Very good at winning the ball back and all the things that you sort of demand from a number 6 type player who plays with his heart on his sleeve every match day. Just isolating the ins. So first of all, Michael Jakobsen, for you, what does he bring? What value is he going to add to the squad?
He's a pretty solid replacement at the back.
Having lost Gulam, of course.
And I think, more than anything, he brings a lot of leadership. And already in pre-season and FA Cup, I think the Jakobsen and LC combo will be a pretty fierce one.
Yeah. Hopefully. Craig Goodwin, now this is a player who's making a lot of headlines, having returned after being in the title winning team. A player that can play as a fullback and also a wide player that's got plenty of goals in him and plenty of assists as well. For you, does that pretty much cover it all?
Massive.
Yeah.
Plus a fan favourite as well, which is huge.
Absolutely. And just quietly, possibly a player who, after having potentially a good season this year, could really get himself back into the Socceroos
for sure. Yeah, especially with the Asian Cup not too far away.
Yep. Now, the next player, Ken Ilso, someone we don't know a huge amount about in terms of his past playing career. He has come from the Malaysian League. Danish player. What does he bring, and where do you think he fits in best from what you've seen so far?
From what I've seen and from what I've heard, it sounds like he's pretty handy anywhere going forwards. And in terms of his pedigree, I will wait and see. But so far I've got no reason to doubt anyone that Kurz has brought in. So
yeah. So it looks like he's going to be taking up that number 10 role, which Karim Mats Moore was brought in to do last season, but left quite prematurely. Pretty well looks like that's where he's going to slot in.
Yeah.
Do you think, from what you'd seen with Matt Moore and obviously past players that have played the number 10 role like Karuska, that Ken also possibly has the quality and talent to measure up to the past standards that we've seen in that position?
I hope so. We've actually been quite blessed with some number 10s down the year, so he's got some big boots to fill. But hey, if he can chip in with a few goals as well.
Absolutely. So for me, the next player, Mirko Boland, the German, who's coming in as a replacement for Daniel Adlung. For me, it looks like he's going to play the number 8 role. He pretty much brings everything that you would want as a number 8. He's good on the ball. He's ferocious when it comes to winning the ball back as well, and it looks like him slotting in with Isaias is going to be quite a formidable set of players behind Ken also this season.
Yeah, looks incredibly solid, and again, I've got no reason to doubt any of Kurz's signings. They can't all be winners, but Marco looks like a winner.
Yeah, and hopefully he can contribute in a goal scoring sense like Daniel Adlung did as well for us last season, because I feel like, again, going back to that debate about where the goals are going to come from this season, you'd imagine that, touch wood, Bubba Diawara doesn't have another season where he's behind the 8 ball, but you'd really hope that the goals do come from all across the park this season, and it's going to be vital that people like Isaias and Boland sort of contribute in that sense, isn't it? So,
chip in.
Yeah. Scott Galloway now could be sort of a utility player, but looks like he's getting into the first team at the moment as a fullback. Coming in from Wellington. What do you reckon?
I'm actually a big fan.
Yeah.
I remember saying to you a few years back that I really didn't mind him, and now I'll be watching him week in, week out. So I don't know if he's quite in the same mould as Gariccio or an Elrich when he was on playing at left back, but I can't knock it at all.
Look, Ben Gariccio, a player who had plenty of critics when it came to his defensive side of his game. Do you think Galloway at least might be a bit of a safer option there? Because
Definitely.
We know for a fact that Ben Gariccio, if he had flaws, one of them was definitely sort of losing his head. Hopefully Galloway's a sound sort of replacement there, at least defensively.
Yeah, and that might facilitate Craigie Goodwin pushing on, doing his thing.
Not having to worry about defensive duties as well, just giving him a free licence.
For sure.
Yeah. Ben Halloran is probably one of the bigger names that we've brought in. You know all about his past in the A-League. Had a bit of a run as a Socceroo. pretty integral in the 2014 setup at the World Cup in Brazil. For me, a player who will obviously come in and, without question, add to the goals that we score throughout the season. A player that adds a lot when it comes to sort of trickery and just expressing himself as a winger. I'm not sure if you agree or disagree with that.
Definitely. I feel like he's the type of player that in years gone by and maybe owners gone by that we wouldn't have got.
Yep.
So I'm really glad to see him come to Hindmarsh.
Do you think, is it going to be another one of these, he comes in for a good first season and then we see the back of him?
Maybe.
Or do you think maybe Ben Halloran has more of a longer term plan to really get his form sort of sorted out back at a lower level in the A-League?
Yeah, I mean, that's the nature of the A-League.
Yeah.
And, I mean, sadly, it's almost the nature of being an Adelaide fan. I mean, maybe under new owners that'll change.
Yeah.
I sure hope it does.
Absolutely.
Maybe by the time we're doing next year's season preview, we'll have the answer.
Yeah, well, hopefully we do keep him for more than one season. It's been a bit of a recurring theme with us, sort of having a player come in for a good 1 or 2 years and then never being able to retain them. So hopefully this is the point where that doesn't continue and we can keep some of these players for the long term. So we're just going to take a look at the oppositions that we'll be up against this season in alphabetical order. So starting with Brisbane Roar, Reece, John Aloisi, the manager, as we know, finished 6th last season. We won one of our games against them, lost the other 2. The star signing for me is Adam Taggart coming in. How do you think they're going to go?
I think they'll do very well. The Aloisi brothers have been there for a little while, so they've got consistency on their side.
Sure.
Pretty strong team, as well as Taggart in there. All the pieces are there. Whether they can make it fit remains to be seen, but I'm tipping them for easily making the finals.
Yep.
If not even top 4.
So probably going off of last season, one of the biggest criticisms that John Aloisi had to face was that he had a really ageing squad. Obviously we see Adam Taggart coming in for Massimo Macaroni as one of the replacements that is made. Do you think on an overall sort of occurrence they'll get through this season despite the fact he hasn't made a whole lot of changes to what was considered widely to be an ageing list?
Yeah, some of the older names have gone, which is just helping to knock down that age average, I guess. I don't think it. They certainly did better than I thought they would. With that ageing list. So, and being as consistent as it is with the player group not being too many turnovers, I think if anything, it could work in their favour.
At Hindmarsh, this is a trend that we've seen since season 1 in 2005. At Hindmarsh, they generally tend to get the better of us, and we generally tend to get the better of them at Suncorp Stadium. Is that something that we really have to try and correct? Because last season we lost to them at Coopers.
Definitely, and I think if we're going to be looking to make finals, which we absolutely should be, we've got to be beating the teams around us, which in this case is going to be Brisbane. Yeah,
and just generally, Coopers wasn't really much of a fortress last season. So if we can start getting those kinds of wins against those oppositions that we seem to struggle against for whatever reason when we play them at home, that'll really go a long way to ensuring that we finish sort of top 3 this season, which is really what you'd hope happens. So moving now into the Central Coast Mariners, in comes Mike Mulvey as the manager this season. They finished last, dead bottom last year. Star signings for me, this will be a slightly controversial topic, but for me it's Ross McCormack and Tommy Orr. We won 2 of our games against them last season, drew the other one. How do you see us going against them this season, and what do you think will happen with the Mariners generally in the A-League this year?
I think this is the best Mariners team on paper we've seen in at least 4 or 5 years
since the Graham Arnold Championship.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
So I'm excited. I mean, I hope they're better than us, but other than that, good on them.
Look, it's a real statement of intent from the owner, Mike Charlesworth. He's been getting a lot of flack since probably 2014, I'd say now, in regards to the lack of investment there on the Central Coast. So we've seen players of Ross McCormack and Tommy Orr's quality coming in, along with the fact that they've got some pretty decent players there from last season. Hiarie, for me, was a real sort of good sign for them last season in a year of lows. I think it's a real statement of intent from the owner to bring in these two players, but obviously the real point of controversy and conjecture is the whole experiment with Usain Bolt and the trial. Now, I just want to get your views on it. I'm not going to share mine. What are yours?
From a footballing sense, I'm not a big fan. From a PR sense, I think everyone's kind of knows the value that he brings. But I mean, again, hats off to the Mariners, because I think they knew that people were going to take it as a bit of a circus, but they've also gone and made some quite good footballing signings, as well as picking up 2 kids from the NPL. So on the balance of things, I don't have a huge problem with it, as long as I don't see him in the A-League this season.
I will just say that his goals package against the team they played in the trial a few days ago got 6 million views on YouTube. And I just want to touch on one other thing. Mike Mulvey. It really gets mentioned, does it, that he's an A-League championship winning manager?
Never.
And that's really probably the best thing they could have done, is just bring in someone who was out of a job, willing to probably not come for a massive amount of money.
And knows the league.
Knows players from within the Australian setup generally. Someone that knows what it's like to win the league, and given that basically he was sacked a few games into the following season of their title defence, that's really what's clouded the fact that he's actually an A-League championship manager. So I think all in all, Central Coast will not be pushovers this year.
No.
You have to agree with that. And I think, from a general point of view, in regards to the health of the league, they're ticking all the boxes. You can't ask a whole lot more of them. So that'll be really interesting. We've seen a lot of easy wins against the Mariners, particularly at home, in the last 3 or 4 years, particularly that title winning year. I would dare say this time around that we're going to have to fight a lot harder to beat them.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Particularly at home. Moving right along to Melbourne City, you would say, Reece, of late, a team that's really sort of become a rivalry to us.
Yes.
So Melbourne City, Warren Joyce going in with his second season with Melbourne City, finished 3rd last year. We lost 2 of our games to them last season, drew 1. In terms of their biggest signing for me, it's Richard Delate, I think is the pronunciation. This man played at Manchester United and Leicester City in the Premier League, and recently as well, which is important. Now, what do you think will occur with City this season? We've seen over the last probably 3 years a lot of real fierce battles against them. Do you think we may sort of square the ledger this year?
Yeah, it's turning into quite the rivalry.
Yeah.
Especially with half our players trotting around in that.
You had to have that little job. Well, look, for me, Melbourne City, there's a lot of pressure on them, isn't there? And so you've got to expect that every time we come up against them, it's going to be a really close encounter. Last season, we lost there 5-0. Pretty disappointing, and we didn't beat them last season. So we, from our end, certainly have a lot to make up for this year when it comes to playing against Melbourne City. We've spoken about the fact that they've got a lot of former Adelaide players and personnel as well. Michael Petrillo, the CEO, of course, at Melbourne City. The one thing for me that really disappoints me about this club is the fact that when we know that the league in general needs a real sugar hit, they're the ones that have the most financial muscle to go out and do it. And this season they haven't done it. Now, the reported reason for that is that Warren Joyce just wants to focus on having a winning culture and really focusing on getting some silverware. But like I said, if anyone's going to go out and sign massive players, this is the club that has the power to do it. Does it disappoint you as equally as it does me that they haven't been more ambitious in the transfer market?
I mean, I'm not going to say no to a Fernando Torres or a player of that ilk.
Yeah.
At the same time, if I was a Melbourne City fan, I can't begrudge them approaching it the way they do. If anything, with the resources they have, building a solid squad is commendable.
Yep. Yeah, look, I'd have to agree with that. Do you think they've really strengthened in key areas this season?
Yeah, they're looking good. The lad looks extremely versatile.
Yeah.
I don't even really know where he plays, fullback, midfield, as well as Riley McGree. He's bounced around a few teams now.
For me, like in the past, they've been really top heavy.
Yeah.
And it doesn't seem like they've really got a massive amount of depth in an attacking sense this time around this season. So I'm just wondering, are they really going to have that firepower when it comes to the crucial games where you really just need individual brilliance to get you over the line? Which we've seen, a lot from the past with them. They've always sort of been the team that will outscore oppositions as opposed to beating them over 90 minutes. Do you really think they're balanced enough in an overall sense that they'll be competitive this year?
Yeah, they're a long way from the Moy, Fornaroli, Navio season. That was a bit of a dream.
Yeah.
But I mean, maybe Fornaroli, he finished last year off pretty strong after coming back from injury. So, if he's ticking, the team's ticking. So,
yeah.
Again, we'll wait and see.
Sound points there, no question. So, moving into Melbourne Victory under Kevin Muscat. As we know, quite a fairy tale season for them last season, managing to win the A-League after finishing 4th after the home and away year. Now, the big topic with Victory, just by the way, we beat them once, drew once, and lost twice against them last year. Now, for me, the biggest sort of topic that surrounds Victory is the fact that A, they're defending a title, and B, they've made huge leeway in the transfer market, having bought in Keisuke Honda. We all know about his pedigree. Not a lot to touch on there. One of the greatest players that has ever really come out of the continent from Japan, as well as Ola Toivonen. Probably less of a name in stature, but relevant. What's more relevant than that is the fact that he played for Sweden in the recent World Cup and has also played for Sunderland back when they were not in League One. So, how do you think things are going to pan out with Melbourne Victory this season, defending a title, and obviously in terms of what's important when it comes to Adelaide United? These games mean more than anything against this particular opposition. How do you think things will go this year with Victory?
On paper, they've done very well. I don't think you can undersell the loss of Besart Borussia.
Yeah.
Toivonen looks like he should be a world beater.
Yeah.
However, we've seen players that look like they should be world beaters in the past. If it was me, I would take a guaranteed Besart Borussia over a risk.
Yeah.
Which I think it's easy to kind of forget about Besart.
It definitely is, isn't it?
But I'm looking forward to not playing against him.
I, for one, and most certainly not disagreeing with that. You got to admit, Besart Borussia, he had form slumps over the time that he was there, but he certainly delivered, particularly on the big occasions and particularly against us.
Yeah.
So them not having Borussia is really going to be a change up to what we've been used to when we play Victory over the past few seasons. But nevertheless, they've certainly strengthened, and it's worrying, isn't it? Because there they are, having won 4 titles to our 1, and very much in pole position to win a 5th. However, if there's anything good going for us, certainly as one of many teams in the A-League that don't like seeing Victory do well, it's the fact that they've had a really turbulent pre-season.
Yeah, including a bit of a premature FFA Cup knockout.
Yep, they also lost to Wellington in New Zealand recently, and they lost here in a behind closed doors friendly. So in terms of their pre-season, it definitely doesn't mean everything, doesn't it? And often it's not really much of a marker for how things will actually pan out over the course of the season, but it's definitely something that they would be a little bit uneasy about, the Victory fans.
Yeah, and maybe this is the Adelaide United in me, but with the signings they've made and all the fanfare, you would just love to see them crumble, wouldn't you?
Absolutely. It's interesting with me with Victory because There was a lot of pressure on Kevin Muscat last season, particularly sort of during the midway point of the year. Throughout that time when we beat them 2-1 with 9 men in Melbourne.
Yeah. Great.
And so there was a lot of pressure on Kevin Muscat. He wasn't really getting consistent results, but he was still always around the mark. And I think it must be a really difficult job being the Melbourne Victory manager if you get criticised so much in a season and then end up winning the championship and still having to endure all that criticism. So you know where their standards lie. And I just feel like it's going to take a lot for them not to show up this year.
Yeah, fingers crossed.
So moving into the Newcastle Jets now, a team that really, in some people's opinion, could have overachieved last season. But overall, they hadn't made the finals in so long. Should have really won it. In the end, they finished second. They'll probably, for me, I know Sydney won the Premier's Plate and were pretty consistent over the course of the year, but I think Newcastle actually played better football. And for me, they were probably really unlucky not to end up winning the A-League last season. But just on them, obviously under Ernie Merrick, a man who knows all about beating Adelaide United. Like I said, finished second last season against them. We didn't do very well at all over the year. We lost 2 games, 1-1 however, closer to the end of the season. And their star signings, I think, most people would agree they did the majority of the strengthening with their squad during last season. They brought in one name, Gier, a Brazilian striker, who we don't know a whole lot about, but it's really the others that they brought in last season who you would expect to really fire this time around again. Yeah,
plus I think a big thing for them was holding on to a lot of those players as well.
Yeah.
It's a bit of a cliche, but that's some of the biggest signings was, not losing anyone, which, we know all about.
Yep.
Your Petradoses, Ugarkovic recently signed on, so consistency might be key. I also heard whispers that some of their investment might be drying up. I don't know if that's got anything to do with the lack of players coming in.
Yeah, right.
I believe Martin Lee was pretty heavily impacted by Trump tariffs.
There you go.
Getting political with...
Indeed. So it'll be interesting to see how Newcastle get on this season. I see no real reason for why they should struggle. Ernie Merrick's a really experienced manager. In all the time that he's managed in the league, I can only think of probably 2 seasons, and they were a long time ago, where he didn't probably meet the objectives at the club.
Yeah, Wellington.
Wellington, I think he was sort of hard done by. I think he's been, certainly in terms of good football being seen played at Wellington, he's been more responsible for that than any other manager they've had. And to come in his first season at Newcastle when there was so much turbulence and disappointment prior to his arrival, he's very much made in the A-League for me, Ernie Merrick, and so I see no real reason why they shouldn't finish in the finals.
For sure.
So moving now into Perth Glory. This is a team that for me, there's plenty of exciting things to discuss. Obviously starting with the manager, Tony Popovic, coming in. Now they finished 8th last season in a very disappointing year under Kenny Lowe, where the main criticism was always aimed at their leaguey defence. Last season we beat them twice, lost once, and their star signing coming in is Juande, who was a Spanish under-21s player. So just going off your predictions, Reece, for me, it's really going to be all about the defence. We know Tony Popovic starts from the back in any club that he goes to, and really strengthening their defensive capabilities. We know they've done that. They've brought in a lot of experienced Australian defenders, particularly ones that were a part of the 2014 World Cup squad. So how do you think, all in all, they'll fare this year?
I think you were spot on. I think they'll be hard to beat under Tony Popovic. Might not make for the most entertaining football. I think that's the way he operates, which I can't begrudge him for that, especially after coming off a pretty poor or underachieving season. So at the same time, they've got plenty of quality there. I don't know, they could be a bit of a surprise package for sure.
Is it massive for them that Diego Castro comes back earlier from pre-season?
Yeah, definitely. It's been pretty well stated that he gets a few extra weeks. And I mean, you can tell, first few weeks of the season every year, he's not at his best.
It's always after January that you start to see the best of him, isn't it?
He's not getting any younger, I hate to say, but so yeah, who knows? Maybe that's Tony Popovich's authoritarianism.
Yeah.
I think he's a pretty hard man. I heard, I don't know if you'd call it a rumour, but I heard a story that players need to be within a certain range of kilos, otherwise they get banished.
Yeah, I've heard that too. They're a really ambitious club, Perth. Tony Sage has quite the checkbook that's always open there, and you'd say that for the return, from a fan's point of view, really always under delivering. So now that they've got a manager that knows how to win silverware, like we saw in 2014 with Western Sydney in the Asian Champions League, is this really a point in Perth's sort of existence where they can turn the page?
Potentially. The A-League's so kind of close that it's not impossible to come in and win in your first year.
Yeah.
However, I would be surprised if that was the case. I wouldn't be surprised, however, to see Perth consolidate and maybe push on next year and beyond.
Yeah, well, that pretty much covers all of what we need to discuss surrounding matters in the WA region. Moving into Sydney FC now, a team that has really dominated the Australian football landscape over the last 24 months. In their eyes, probably should have won the A-League last year after finishing first and winning the Premier's Plate. What's significant with them is the fact that out goes Graham Arnold and enters the Socceroos fold. In comes Steve Corica, someone that's been very much an integral part of that club since they were formed as a player and an assistant manager. Was a caretaker during a brief period as well, a fair few years ago now. It's a matter of him jumping into a pretty big job indeed. What most people say is the biggest in the country. Now they've finished first, like I mentioned last season. We lost to them twice and drew once. The star signings for me, and I think is what's pretty clear for everyone, the fact that they've recruited Siem de Jong and Adam Lafondra. What do you reckon is going to happen with Sydney this season?
Huge signings. Anything Melbourne Victory can do, Sydney can do better, I guess. Depends how you look at it. But Siem de Jong is massive signing. That is phenomenal. At a really good age as well. Again, Sydney playing, moving around a little bit whilst the stadium's under construction never helps. Not that they have too many fans to move around anyway, but...
Do you think something that's going to be interesting with them is the fact that they're losing such a versatile player in Muziewski, who very much killed it last season in the A-League, was pretty much everyone's favourite player last season, I think, and even though Siem de Jong on paper's a very adequate replacement, they're definitely different players, aren't they? And it's... if anything, possibly going to slow them down a little bit more in midfield.
Plus with Lafondra in for Bobo.
Yeah.
And then obviously Graham Arnold. I think the one thing we can say with some certainty is it's going to be a different team. Manager and two massive outs.
Yeah.
I guess what that looks like, we'll find out this Friday.
Yeah, correct. We do play them in the first round of the A-League and in the FA Cup final, as we've touched on in previous videos with the Purebred Reds channel. So really, they can't afford to not make finals. So if you've got Melbourne Victory finishing around the mark, if you've got us finishing around the mark, if you've got teams like Western Sydney having an element of a lack of predictability happening, and other A-League sides like Central Coast Mariners recruiting really well, teams like Newcastle coming off a really good season, then how do you fit everything in if you assume Sydney are going to make the finals?
Yeah, this is The interesting thing about the A-League, I guess, because you sit here on the eve of the season and really it's... maybe you can pick a Victory in Sydney to be up there. Really, anywhere else can fit anywhere else. It almost wouldn't surprise me to see, I don't know, Mariners have a great year, but then obviously someone needs to drop out. Yep. So, yeah.
Again, they are showing ambition when it comes to recruiting players. And for me, Sydney FC, they can't afford to not show up this season. There's no excuses about the fact they've lost Graham Arnold because, there's always talk about how the transition would be seamless. Everyone was on the same page there as a club in terms of how they ran on the pitch. So we can only expect that Sydney FC will really provide a stern challenge when we come up against them this year. As always, and it's exciting because they're always massive games, particularly Cooper Stadium, aren't they?
Massive. I cannot wait for Friday.
Yeah. Well, that's everything within regards to Sydney FC. So we're now going across the ditch, Reece, to Wellington Phoenix. Mark Rudin, the manager, they finished 9th last season. Star signing is Stephen Taylor. He played 215 games in the English Premier League. So a massively experienced player that you generally don't see going to Wellington.
No.
Look, you've got to highlight the fact that Mark Rudin, I think it's a fantastic appointment because it's the first untried NPL manager that is being given a shot at the top level in Australian football. Coming off a season where they really had a bit of a shocker. Car crash, really. Finished second to last, lucky not to finish last. A lot of off-field discussion about whether they add any value in Australia's only professional league. How do they come back from this?
On the pitch, I think it's pretty simple what they need to do. They need to win a lot of matches. Now, how you do that is a little bit more of a complicated task. I think they're moving in the right direction. What I've noticed is a lot of the newer players that have come in, David Williams was another one speaking today. The general sort of tone coming from all their new signings is we've all forgotten collectively about the past. It's a new era starting at Wellington and everyone's really hungry. No one's going to use the excuse that we've got travel that other teams don't have to deal with. We're there to win and it's about time that we sort of get it together at the club. So off the field it appears like a fresh start might be imminent, but on the pitch they ended up losing in the FA Cup, going out quite early. Mark Rudin said he barely had any time to work on anything with that game, but they did have a bit of an early exit in the FA Cup. How they'll fare in the season is anyone's guess, really. For me, certainly an element of predictability lacking, I'd say, and I'm really interested to see whether a manager that knows Australian players a lot more than the previous manager they had last season is going to make a difference when it comes to round trips to Perth and even Cooper's Stadium, where they've had a shocking record over the past few seasons in the A-League. Do you reckon Wellington fans have any reason to be really optimistic about this season, or is it a matter of let's just try and improve in the manner of results? That front three, Williams, Burns, Krishna, is phenomenal. That's one of the best going around. So if that can get that yellow fever jumping, I think there's plenty of cause for optimism. Plus, I was just going to jump in and say that excuse about travel, they should be flipping that to their advantage and say every team that comes to Wellington has got, this massive away game. Doesn't help playing in the enormous Westpac Stadium, but
without a huge attendance generally.
If I was Wellington, I'd want to make that work for me.
Definitely. So finishing off with the Western Sydney Wanderers, the team that we beat in that fantastic 2015-2016 title decider at Adelaide Oval. Marcus Babbel comes in, the German manager who has obviously played for Liverpool during a pretty illustrious playing career. They finished 7th last season. Importantly, it was the last round of last season where we beat them at the Western Sydney Wanderers ground, which prevented them from making the finals in the end, which was a huge win for Adelaide. So we beat them twice last season, drew once. The star signings for me, 2 Germans, Alexander Borja-Hahn, I think is the pronunciation. Now he's a former Schalke and Bayern player in the Bundesliga, and also just Patrick Ziegler, who we don't know a whole lot about, but in a trivial sense, what's sort of relevant about him is the fact that his dad was born in Adelaide.
Yeah, according to Wikipedia.
Yeah, so that's sort of something that definitely slipped under the radar, but there you go. He could have been an Australian international had things gone a different way, but in an overall sense, how do you think Western Sydney Wanderers are going to go this year?
It doesn't help playing on the road, well, if you could call it that, away from home, and everywhere's away from home for Western Sydney at the moment, which would be rough, and especially in terms of getting that home support, which makes them so hard to play against away. But again, on paper, they've recruited really well from manager down, so it looks like it could be a really hard team to beat.
Their pre-season's been very questionable. They've performed quite poorly when it's come to games in the FFA Cup that they've ended up winning, but very much struggling over the line. And then losing to Sydney recently in that very same competition, pretty poorly, really. A 3-0 loss. These are big derby games, Reece, and we know how badly they did against Sydney last season. So to lose 3-0 at home in the FA Cup, I mean, there's plenty of question marks on whether they've recruited the right players. Is this the right direction to go down? Is this going to be another real surprise packet this year?
Yeah, it feels like yesterday, this time last year, when I was thinking that Wanderers were the real deal.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of cautious to really, put my name against anything. I think it's for me it's on a bit of a knife edge.
Yeah.
Everything could piece together, and we could be seeing them in the finals, or it could all crumble pretty quick, I think.
For me, this has to work because there's been a lot of instability at Western Sydney over the past few seasons. The player turnover rate is massive. And obviously that never helps in a season where, you don't have a massive home and away fixture list. And, even though it's a massive pre-season, players are coming in at all various points. And if it doesn't work early on for Marcus Babbel, I think given the nature of how things went under Josip Kombau in a season where there was immense struggle, he could be in trouble, because Wanderers fans are at a point where they've sort of had enough and they expect success because in terms of their infrastructure off the pitch, they should be sort of competing every season, really. They almost played Sydney off the park in the first half of that game that they lost recently, but the second half was just dour. And so it shows that that's a squad that's in serious need of gelling. It wouldn't surprise me if they struggle in the first few rounds, but I feel like with Marcus Babbel being a fairly high-profile player, coming into really wanting to try and get his management career, rolling and on a course correction, you'd feel like they're going to move heaven and earth to ensure that this is a really successful season for them. So that's our take on the Western Sydney Wanderers. So that is a wrap for our 2018-2019 A-League season preview. I hope you enjoyed the show and the new look dynamic of having a co-panelist on for the first time, which we'll be repeating essentially every time we put out a new video almost. I just want to quickly point out that you can listen to the About You Now podcast, which is a fantastic fan-produced podcast about all things Adelaide United, and also for all your Adelaide United news, go to AUFC News on Facebook, which is a fantastic Facebook page and your go-to source of any Adelaide United news. So two fan-produced mediums there for all things Adelaide United. Make sure you check them out. I also hope that you managed to get FFA Cup tickets by now. Huge game, obviously, to look forward to in about 10 days' time. And I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you very much for watching, and stay tuned for more Adelaide United content from the Purebred Reds Adelaide United Fan TV. It's been great bringing you this season preview, and we'll see you next time. Go the Reds. Thank you.